Good evening to all, and we are ready for today's presentation. So today we have a very interesting topic, and this topic normally follows the ethics seminar. Let's get ready. Feel free to take your notes and write down your questions. At some point, we are going to pause to get your questions and continue before we get to the practical. Let's get ready. So these are the topics that we are going to be covering today. As you know, during the review that was generously provided by Giovanna Lester, our assistant coach, we were going over ethical responsibilities, and I'm sure that we will have more opportunities to identify what we should do, and what would be the best choice and the best option. Today, we will also speak about the interpreter profile, and we will be describing interpreter competence, linguistic competence, research and technical competence, and then we will end with practicum. I want you to take this down because we want you to really attain this knowledge to the point that it becomes natural to you. Okay, so now let's talk about this ethical responsibilities contained in most codes. As Giovanna Lester mentioned, interpreters respect their client right and privacy, and more importantly, their confidentiality. This is just a quick reminder. Then you have to ensure that you understand when what you're doing represents a conflict of interest. You can also decline to undertake work that it's not suitable to your competence or accreditation level or language level. Sometimes we may not be accredited, certified, in different settings. They call it differently. However, you may have the knowledge and you are able to deliver. So once you understand that you can do so, if you are in a region like the Commonwealth of Bahamas that until this point, we do not have an organized body, then, we basically have to leave it up to your discretion. But in some other regions or jurisdictions, interpreters do form part of organized bodies, and they would have had the opportunity to test their proficiency or delivery of the message. And this is what you have to consider. It's okay to decline to undertake work that you are not prepared to do, or that you are not knowledgeable of, or that is beyond your area of expertise. Remember to relay information accurately and impartially. You do not add information, you do not take it away, you deliver the message. In some settings or situations, like Gio said, you may have to basically do like a localization of the terminology, do a cultural kind of mediation mixed with the interpretation that you're doing. You have to consider the culture of those who are listening to your interpretation. Remember to maintain your professionalism at all times, detached from the case, the matter, the client. You are the voice, you are what everyone else has to hear, as if the person spoke that language. So if the person did not do something, you should not add it in your message. And please avoid misuse of inside information. Rather, I should say, guard against misuse of inside information. Avoid using information that you know for any purpose, for any comment, inside the setting or outside the setting or any other context. Basically, it's almost like you have to learn to delete what happened in that courtroom, in that medical setting, in that doctor's office. It happened there, and you have to train your brain to leave it there. You don't take it home. You don't take it to your children, your family, not even to your other work setting. You work at this setting and you have to train yourself to leave whatever happened there, just there. So what is expected from the interpreter? This is the interpreter profile. Confidentiality, accuracy, and impartiality. You have to ensure that you do not disclose inside information. Very important. Proper competence and skills. And if you are part of a jurisdiction that has an organized body, accreditation level. Also, you are expected to detach. Professional detachment is very important. So let's go over it again. Confidentiality is very important. Accuracy and impartiality, non-disclosure of inside information, proper competence and skills. Also, accreditation level if you are part of an organized body like that has an association with a board that can certify your skills, and professional detachment. This is very important. I went over it twice so that you take note, because as an interpreter, you are expected to have these characteristics.
And
I'm
I would
going to
like to
ask
add
you.
something. Yes, I'd
Go
like
ahead.
to add something. When we say professional detachment, we do not mean that you need to be insensitive to what's going on. On the contrary, as an interpreter, you are going through whatever process the victim went twice, because you're hearing it in that language, and then you're repeating it again in another language. So you're living that same process twice. This is called vicarious trauma. It's living somebody else's emotion as a third party, and you're living that. So when you are at a conference, and let's say the conference has to do with political things, asylum, refugees, and this is a matter that you feel very close to, you may suffer vicarious trauma. When they show images of children drinking dirty water, whatever. So that is what we are trying to teach you when it comes to professional detachment. It's not that you will become insensitive, but you will develop some sort of defense. Some colleagues of mine, they, after the job, go meditate. Others go have a glass of whiskey. Others go to church, etc., etc. You choose your medicine. But it is very important that when the event is in front of you, you maintain a certain distance so you don't absorb the full impact of it. Imagine if someone is crying while giving a deposition, for example, or the speaker on stage is also crying because he's talking about something difficult that happened in her life or his life. You cannot cry as the interpreter. You have to continue speaking. Can you show emotion? Yes. You pause, you slow down, you change the tone of your voice, but you're not gonna cry like the person is crying. So this is what Miro here means right now as professional detachment. You need to be able to convey the message. In order to do that, you need to learn to protect yourself and protect that message you're trying to pass and remain neutral. Your microphone, ma'am.
You will be part of a case on two sides of the case or the matter. It has happened in our team. Sometimes you might be required to interpret at a deposition or a statement record. But then sometimes you are required to interpret assisting a specific client, office, lawyer, government office.
Yeah.
And sometimes later down, the matter evolves into something else, develops into something else, and your services may be required. Again, it happened in our office. We ended up translating something and we said, wait a minute. So you have to understand when to say, this job is not for me. It's a conflict of interest. I had to decline a job at one point because of the fact that the victim that was murdered was not my friend, was not known to me, but was known to someone that I knew in the community. And the person that I knew in the community was close to me. And I understand the person was close to the victim. It's not my direct concern, but unfortunately, I do not believe I am qualified to interpret for this matter. I'll have to decline, but I'll be glad to recommend someone else. Some person did not understand my decision, but I do not think it was a matter for me to be a part of. I don't know if maybe my friend would have been called to the stand and it might have carried an emotional burden on me. So I have to understand when a job is not for me to take. It's okay to recommend someone else. So this is basically what we are trying to share with you. Thank you so much, Gio. So let's continue now. And let's talk about competence or competencies. So we are going to focus now on interpreting competence, linguistic competence, research and technical competence. All of these together will help you to deliver your message accurately. It's very important. You can be competent as an interpreter, but your linguistic skills, you have to be able to have, you have to be able to play with language. You have to be able to understand when to use one word instead of the other. This is what we are talking about. And then research and technical competence are very much related to the other two. So in order to work on this part, what we are going to do, we are going to prepare for the practicum. All right. Now, we want you to read in silent this paragraph, and in your mind, substitute the underlined words with more suitable terms. You will substitute the underlined words with more suitable terms. This is in English now. We are not working with your second language now. So this is an answer key. Of course, this is not the only answer possible. So this is what we put together. It's the ability to interpret a message from the source language to the target language. And you have abbreviations that we use in the simultaneous whispering, consecutive liaison, and sight modes, because those are the interpreting modes. It implies the ability to assess and comprehend the original message accurately. So that means without deletions, additions, and all that. It includes the knowledge, awareness of the interpreter's own role in the interpreting encounter session or interpreting setting or context, okay? Or something like that. I hope you enjoyed this exercise, and let's continue with the presentation now. So what are the competent skills that we want to focus on? So you have to have active listening skills, and you want to strive to improve them through self-training. A very good way to train yourself is when you drive home, and at the end, we are going to ask Gio to also give us some tips. She's awesome with that. When you drive home at the end of the day, you can tell yourself what happened during your day in your second language or third language. And there's a way to keep the language active. And then you want to do the same thing we did with the exercise before this slide. You want to tell yourself the story of what happened in the day in one language, in the other language, switching one term, using another term, paraphrasing. There are many ways of training yourself, but you do a lot of self-training. You can also start watching a movie and try to replace phrases. You might want to turn on the subtitles and then read what is being said. You want to turn on the subtitles in the other language and read the subtitles and test to see if you understood the same thing or if you could have improved that written, the translation in the subtitles. You also want to learn to use your voice. That's why we pay so much attention to your the pitch of your voice. How do you pronounce? How do you change your tone of voice? Is it high? Is it low? So this is very important. You have to use your voice to convey the message. If the speaker that you're assisting speaks with anger, then you change your tone of voice because you are right now angry. But if the person is just laughing or jiggling, then you can't start changing your voice because this is the part of the presentation when you change your voice to convey not only the message, but also the emotion. Also, it's very important that you have good memory retention skills. Now, some persons who are not very good with their memory, right here, have to develop skills or techniques to enhance your memory, because your job will require you to use your memory at some point. For example, if you are interpreting at a conference and suddenly you see new acronyms that you've never seen before and your booth partner writes down what the acronym means, even if they place a sticker on the glass of the booth, you want to recall in your mind what the acronym means, because otherwise you might find yourself following the presenter, reading the presentation and reading and looking for the new term. So you want to also enhance your memory skills. What else you have to do to enhance your competence skills? You must be able to take notes during the interpretation assignment to ensure accuracy of the information given. Now, sometimes a speaker might say something that you did not understand. For those of us who took phonetics and phonology, we have signs that we can write that will help us to figure out what the word is. But if you don't have that training, put the message in the context, and then you have to figure out what could have been the things that this person could have said given this context, this day, what they are speaking about, because you're already aware of the terminology, the context, the information, because you prepared yourself. That was part of your number one instruction on your first day of training. All right. Another very important thing, you have to be able to mentally transpose and verbalize into the target language. So basically, you will find idioms, you will find, like Gio said, sports jokes. You have political issues that come up, and then they become memes or trendy, and then everybody is making reference to this one thing. So you have to be aware, you have to verbalize, you have to be able to take this message from point A to point B without changing the meaning. Also, mirror the act of persuasion. All right. You must have mental alertness. Some of us stay drinking coffee in the booth. but some other persons drink tea, some others drink a lot of water. Now we also have breathing exercises. We do have things that we do not eat when we are on a very demanding interpreting role, because we need to keep our brain alert. We maintain attention and concentration at all times. You do not take any message for granted. You take every single piece of the message as if, okay, I got this, I have to pay attention to this. You don't say, oh, I got it. You do not allow your brain to get lazy. If you need a break, if you are interpreting at a conference, that's why you have a booth partner. But if you're doing consecutive and it's only you, then there are breathing exercises that we will be teaching you in the near future. And very important, observe the speaker's gestures and the reactions of the listeners. The gestures might tell you, what is this word that you didn't understand that you have to figure out to put your idea together? The listener's reaction can tell you if maybe the words was offensive or funny or emotional. Gio, can you help us with this part?
Yes, once in a while, because of an accent or language vice, certain words don't get pronounced all the way through. They get eaten up. And in that process, you do not know if what the person was saying was negative, positive. And the audience reaction to it will help you. Once in a while, we'll have to simply make up for it, for what you didn't hear in that split second. But you have to keep your ears and your mind open for when you catch it, so you can correct yourself or add that new information that you forgot back there into your discourse. Because again, you are somebody else's voice, and that message has to come out full. So it does happen sometimes. Microphone.
I recall interpreting at a conference for brain standards. It was highly technical. And there was a presenter who spoke Russian, but he decided to deliver his presentation in English. Mm-hmm. And he thought he spoke English accurately enough to deliver the presentation. There was an interpreter from the UN that was, I was asked to select someone from the UN to come to the Bahamas and help me. He was awesome, but he was like, what do we do with him? And the presentation was one thing. At the beginning of the session, the presenter apologized and said, oh, I've changed the topic of my presentation. But in the middle of the presentation, he said, you know what? Me show you to you, right? So let me show you. And he was very smart, very smart. He took a cell phone, and he opened it and he broke it down into pieces, and he showed the audience what's inside a cell phone. All right. And then the speaker would say, and stuff like that. So what do I do as an interpreter? Do I say, and stuff like that? To make it sound like I didn't understand? Or do I use a similar term that closes the idea and kind of means that, well, and you know, so it was really challenging because we had to keep completing the sentence for him and say, well, unrelated matters and you know, and tools of this. So, and suddenly he was mentioning the chemistry table, Mendeleev table. So my brain went to grade 8. And it was, so you will find things like, for the interpreter, we find it unreasonable, but we are there. what do you do? Do you choose to prove that the presenter is wrong, or do you choose to solve the problem, period, to the best of your ability? So things like that can happen, okay? You may have presenters who just choose to switch their topic in court. You may have, they call it dockets, at least in the Bahamas, the court documents. They might choose to read the dockets and don't give you a copy. So what do you do? So let's talk about linguistic competence. So this is the ability to comprehend the source language and apply this knowledge to render the message as accurately as possible in the target language. Now, as we did before, in your mind, start replacing words. So you start working with your brain and training your brain to have the ability to go from one language to the other and to replace a word to use another word and so forth. So the ability to comprehend the source language or the language of delivery and apply this knowledge to render the message as accurately as possible in the target language or into the other language or into language B or so forth. Let's continue. So we said before that the ability to interpret a message from the source, remember now, source and target are always used. The interpreting competence is different from the linguistic competence, even though they are together, but they both include interpreting from the source language into the target language. Interpreting competence then will include the mode accurately. Now, the linguistic competence include then to render, it includes the understanding and rendering. So now that's when you worry or are more concerned about developing your language skills, your linguistic skills. So how many nouns can I use to replace this noun? How many adjectives can I use? Can I use this adjective phrase and replace it with a full noun? For example, in English, we say speaking is important. We could have said to speak is important. Can you do that into your second language? So that is what the linguistic competence is about. But it will always include source language into target language. Listen to those terms. Pay attention to those terms rather. So now let's talk about the linguistic competence. Now let's go back. This is the ability. Now let's go deeper. So this language skill that we are talking about, implies that you have to have in-depth knowledge and understanding of the working languages, your language pair. We call it a language pair or language combination, right? So you have a very good command of both languages, and you understand registers. You can go up in your register or lower in the register. Why is this important? For example, when you are in court, the judge will speak legal. You have, for example, a fisherman who was found in illegal waters and is going to be charged with illegal fishing. And what kind of language are you going to speak to the person who's already stressed, is not used to understanding legal terms and all of that? So you have to understand how to change your range and go from high register to lower register, use more common language. You do not change the message, but you definitely adapt the register to ensure that you understood because it's not about how good of a linguist you are. It's about how well the person who's depending on you is able to comprehend what's happening in that courtroom. Can you help me with that, Gio?
Yes, it's very common, especially here in the United States, in Miami, for example. People have adopted English and mixed with their Spanish. So they have created a pidgin. That's a language that's not a dialect, it's in its birth. So they mix English and Spanish in order to function. So they say things like failear. And we have to use words like that when we are speaking with individuals who grew up here, speaking Spanish at home, working in English, without ever going to school to learn English. And that's how they speak. A colleague of mine was working in a case, and the witness kept saying, La Llorona, La Llorona, La Llorona. In Spanish, my friend was like, who is this crying lady she's talking about? No, she meant La, your honor, the judge, because everybody called the judge your honor. And in Spanish, it was a woman, La, your honor, La, your honor. So once in a while, you need to get out of your linguistic bias to come down in order to communicate properly.
Thank
I have
you.
a situation that was the opposite, and it was directly with me. When I go to a doctor and I say, my son dislodged his clavicle, and the doctor looked at me like, you mean his collarbone? There's my son hurting, and the doctor wants me to lower my register because he doesn't think I should be speaking in his medical language. So it can go one way or the other. You need to be sensitive and get rid of the linguistic bias.
Thank you. So we have also the fact that we have to have knowledge in subject areas and understand relevant terminology. Now, I like this one that is coming next, which is keep up with the changes in your working languages. Keep up with current events and related jargon. Now, we have a few bankers here, and I'm sure you will appreciate this comment. I was interviewed for a podcast that deals with the financial world, rather. They were asking me, why is it that in Spanish we have to use so many anglicisms for terminology, for like terms like trust? There's so many. So some terms, I was asked, why is it that some terms are not translated? This was for translation. And I had to explain that after World War II, when the United States had the master plan to restore the world economy, so they came up with certain financial tools. And because it was established by them, it stayed with those names. So sometimes we have to translate it, but sometimes it's very hard to translate, like for words like shares, for example, sometimes, and capital, sometimes within the same document, when you translate it, you have to understand what they meant when they said capital exactly, or I'm trying to think of Spanish terms, but those who are in the financial world can probably appreciate that. So you will realize that in some cases, you just have to learn what terminology is mainly used, and localize the terminology also for your audience. For example, when we are in the meetings held by FIT IFT, that's the International Federation of Translators, the original term was established in French, so they call it la FIT. It's only in the full English setting you will hear IFT, IFT. Other than that, they will say feet, and it's not your foot. It's feet as in Federación Internacional de Traductores, and in French, the acronyms are the same. So it's very important to keep up with the changes and understand when you have to interpret or translate in your brain, or for the purpose of this explanation, on when you have to keep using the term in that other language. Sometimes in interpretation, especially in interpretation at conference settings, you might not have time to explain the entire term, but everybody in the audience understands what they are talking about. You are the only one who don't, because this is not your setting. So you have to understand when you don't change the terminology and go with this term as said originally, because that's what the audience is used to. And finally, we have to understand clearly and state a wide range of possibilities, right? When it comes to ideas and arguments, how do you solve this idea? How do you do this in this setting? There's not one solution. You may have many possibilities, but which one is the one that you have enough time to deliver? There was an issue at a conference. The speaker had a very strong African accent, and they were talking about world peace. So they were sanctioning the warmongers. And the speakers then came on behalf of his country to sanction the warmongers. And the interpreters said that in the speaker's word, I am here on behalf of my country to express my disgust about the tribe of the Guamangas. The tribe, the person assumed that it was a tribe. So, but we're talking about world peace, and the warmongers are persons that instigate war, los belicistas. And so it's very important to have in-depth knowledge of your working languages, because even if you don't understand what this person is saying, there was nothing in the agenda that say that natives, whatever, or tribal, whatever, ancestry or tribes, or the king of a tribe. There was nothing in reference to that. So why would this person even bring a tribe into an event that has nothing to do with it? Very important. Gio, anything else to add? Microphone.
It is a common situation, actually. Unless you have papers in front of you, unless there is a visual aid available, this will happen. It's very common. So studying ahead is very important. And nowadays, with the advent of YouTube, for example, you look for the speakers. That's what I do when I have a conference. I search for my speakers. I research them and I listen to them. So in the case of this gentleman, maybe there was a YouTube channel and the interpreter might have been able to listen to him and better understand his accent. So research, 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 and research. Never stop researching.
Thank you. Okay, so speaking about research, thank you. Research and technical competence. Ability to efficiently acquire the additional linguistic and specialized knowledge necessary to interpret in specialized cases. This is exactly what Gio was talking about. Many of you might be offered to interpret at a conference that might not necessarily be your area of expertise, but it doesn't mean that maybe you can venture into it. I know Gio is part of the World Economic Forum, and finance has a very strong topic for her. But I also recall that at one point in one conference, we had to work for one of the leaders in technical production for, what was it, for engines, John Deere, for example.
Yeah.
Very technical, and they brought in a pilot to do the motivation. He was the motivational speaker. A lot of technical failures and a lot of technical terminology that was never shared with us. So what do you do? Do you interpret simultaneously, or do you summarize, or do you just depend on what is on the screen and deliver the message? What do you do? So let's talk about this setting that it's it's more common than you think. Because you think, oh, they are going to give me the information ahead of time. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen. There are many reasons to do so for that. The main reason is intellectual property, and a lot of speakers do not like to share the intellectual property too early before it's supposed to be released to the public. Some others just take long to finish their presentation. And, there are many other factors, but the fact remains that you will find this, I would like to say, too often to our liking as an interpreter. So Gio, what do you do when you have to deliver this message to a 50% Portuguese speaking audience? It is an awesome presentation. Your audio fails, you're only depending on visual, and you still have to interpret. What do you do?
I interpret.
What do you interpret?
What I see on the screen. Understand two things, actually three. Number one, you are given the subject of the conference. And then you know who the client is. And third, you have done your research. You have to. You cannot walk into a booth code. That is criminal, not acceptable in the least. So I know that it's the John Deere conference. What I do, I go online and I look for John Deere events in November. And I check. Maybe this year they didn't have one, but they had one last year. And I check that website from last year. And I see what they have available. And I check to see what new equipment they have. So I have to do detailed research, very detailed research. And the best part is, most companies nowadays, especially those who trade internationally, will have a website on the other country's language. So if you're lucky enough, you can search for locations, and then you're going to have the country, China, Italy, Brazil, Argentina. You click on the country and a website will open in that language and will allow you to do vocabulary research. Because what I call a backhoe over here maybe is not called a retroescavadora in Portuguese anymore. Maybe they changed that name. The website will teach me. Maybe they call it BH backhoe 25 because it's backhoe model 25, but in the Brazilian website, they didn't translate it as retroescavadora 25. No, BH25, and that's the language I am going to use. Same thing happens with pharmaceuticals too. So research is absolutely essential. You didn't receive the material, it's your obligation to get ready with whatever is available in your hands. It's John Deere. They didn't give you anything. You don't have any other anything on the internet about John Deere. Caterpillar makes the same type of stuff. Go to the Caterpillar website and research terminology, at least as far as equipment is concerned. So when they are talking about the equipment, you know. So if you can't hear the speaker, but you see there is a beautiful backhoe there, you can say, our backhoes are now very well equipped to assist you. And hopefully that's what he was talking about. But once in a while, you need to use your knowledge with the results of your research to create what is being said, to recreate it because of a technical difficulty, for example.
Yes. Now, I'm going to tell you what I had to do from the Spanish booth in that same instance. The presentation was delivered in Portuguese. And for some reason, I can hear it, I understand it. Don't ask me how and why. But when I read it, I can understand it, but I want to double check. So what I kept doing, when we have several languages at a conference, normally the technicians, just for safety, they will prepare the booth for something called relay. And relay means just how it happens in track and field. If the presenter is speaking in Portuguese and my Portuguese is not proficient enough, then I will relay, I will get a feed from Gio's delivery into English, and then I will go from her English into my Spanish, and somebody else might go from my Spanish into French if their language combination is Spanish-French, because they don't understand Portuguese. So what I had to do, I did the same thing Gio did. I interpreted. And because in relay, I'm supposed to be 1 or 2 seconds behind, I kept interpreting and switching to her channel. And then once I knew, oh, I got it right. So I kept going. So I would go behind her, like kind of showering her in case I had to fix something that I didn't say. So I kept going, yada, yada, do, 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 la, 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 do, do, do. And, you know, this person hardly was breathing, but every now and then when he decided to breathe, then I had enough time to try to listen to Gio and see if I was on point. And we were able to deliver the message. Don't ask us how, but I guess that's how. So yes, sometimes you have to rely on your visuals, information. You already know what the event is all about. So for the sake of research, you should have already found out that more than likely John Deere built an engine that maybe was used on a plane or a boat or a something. So then you say, okay, so let me see what they could talk about. Okay, engines in boats, engines in trucks, engines in whatever devices or means of transportation or they built for. So you prepare for that. So when the pilot came, we were not ready for the pilot, but we already knew that once they had something in writing, we could deliver. And at the end of the day, he was talking about leadership.
And that was the best part. He was not talking about piloting an airplane, and we did not need to know about the parts of an airplane. He was there because he was a leader and he was a motivational speaker. The group was a sales group. So his speech was something we could do, specifically because it was not technical.
Yes. Yes. Okay, so let's talk about how to gain familiarity with the subject matter to be discussed. As Gio said, you research, 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 and again, your research.
Yeah, no. Yeah, research is one of the most important tools you have. Actually, the most important tool you have is your brain. Then comes research.
Now look at this practicum one. We're getting closer to this interpreting developing skills. We call it developing skills. That's exactly what we call it. So now you're going to pretend you are interpreting the following excerpt of a speech. Many times speakers are speaking and they turn their head off and the word goes true. And then they move the lapel and they cover the mic. A lot of things happen. So let's pretend we are in a conference and this is the scenario. We have a few words we are unable to understand, comprehend. We don't know the meaning. We didn't hear it. It doesn't sound clear. Can we put together the message with suitable words, with appropriate words? Now take a look at this and remember, when you are working at professional level, not always, but generally, you will use high register. When you're doing community interpreting, that's different. You will not always encounter high register, right? High register rather. But let's take a look at this and let's solve this paragraph because we have to find these terms. So we have been reading this paragraph and we found the solution. So let's see how close we were from the actual answers. We were very close. Very, very close. So let's continue and we are almost done. The plenary discussion of the video that this is making reference to would have been the video we started to talk about, the funny video. So I want you to remember your assignments are being extended when you are answering now. That video that if you haven't submitted your assignment mainly, you can feel free to include anything that you would have learned today. If you submitted your assignment before you learned this new topic, especially the interpreter profile, it's fine. So I want you to use your anticipation mode, your anticipation skills. And we want to start thinking what's coming next. This is like being an interpreter at an event, and day one was very eventful. And although you may have information in terms of your agenda for day two, but day one was so eventful that many presentations were changed. Plenary A presenter had to go to breakout room 2. Anything could have happened on that day one because there were a lot of changes. So what you are going to do from now on is you want to start anticipating the next session. Don't wait until the next session comes. Start researching. Okay, so I've already learned the interpreter's ethics. Now I learned about the interpreter profile. Then I learned about the competence, different types of competence that and skills that I have to have as an interpreter. What do you think is going to be module 4 about? And at this point, I'm going to stop recording. And I'm so glad that you were so helpful with today's presentation. Gio, any words before we stop recording? Mike.
Yes, all of you understand. One of the things we do as interpreters is bring the world close together. Interpreters have been the ones who helped avoid wars. Interpreters have also caused problems, as we've learned with regards to the Hiroshima case. The interpreter interpreted what was said the wrong way and ended up causing the A-bomb to be, displaced. So anyways, we have a responsibility to being very familiar with what we are supposed to be saying. We are not gods, don't worry about it. We don't have the responsibility of the world on our shoulders, but we do need to have a commitment to the job we do, to help people really communicate. Without that commitment, don't show up, don't be there. You'll be a hindrance. Make sure you have that in you so that you can bring it out and help us do exactly what we do, make this world better by helping people communicate.
In fact, one of the reasons why the slogan for international culture is uniting cultures and providing language solutions is because that's what interpreters do. We bring the world together, we mediate, we help. And I totally agree. Just to echo your message, Gio. Thank you very much, Gio.
Thank you
It
all.
has been a pleasure to share this lecture with you. And as we pause the recording session, I know some of you might stay behind, and we will have some practical assignments for you to start getting your brains ready for message delivery, language usage in the interpreting setting, and all the other topics that we have been developing or talking about or sharing with you. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.